It happened in 3 seconds. 3 seconds between a hand reaching out and a man realizing he'd just signed his own ending. The thing is, nobody saw it coming. Not even her. Grace had worked at Ember Lounge for 6 months without incident. 6 months of perfecting the art of being unnoticed. Pouring drinks, serving tables, existing in the background like expensive furniture that blends into walls. That was safety in a world where the wrong kind of attention could erase you. Roy Vollaro owned the club in every way that mattered, even if the deed said otherwise. He sat in the VIP section most nights, flanked by men who didn't smile, conducting business in voices that never rose above the baseline. Grace had learned his rhythm. Macallan 25, neat, single ice sphere. She made it without being asked. Set it down without making eye contact. Left before he could notice her. For 6 months, that system worked. Tonight, Kyle Brennan sat across from Roy. New money trying to buy his way into old power. He'd been coming for weeks, laughing too loud, spending too much, desperate to be seen by the right people. Grace watched from behind the bar as Kyle leaned forward, talking about liquidity and deals Roy clearly didn't care about. Then Kyle's eyes drifted, landed on her. He smiled. Grace didn't smile back, just kept polishing glasses with steady hands, pretending she hadn't noticed. When she brought Roy's drink to the table, Kyle intercepted her attention. "Hey, sweetheart, bring me one of those too, yeah?" Her voice stayed professional, detached. "I'll send someone over." Kyle laughed, emboldened by alcohol and audience. "Nah, you make it. If it's good enough for the boss, it's good enough for me." His hand reached out. Fingertips brushed her wrist. Not violent, not aggressive, just presumptuous, like her body was part of the service. Grace pulled back smoothly, heart kicking hard against her ribs. "I'll get Marcus to help you." She turned and walked away, forcing her breathing to stay even. Behind her, Kyle turned to Roy like they were sharing a joke. "Touchy, huh? Probably hears that all night." Roy took a slow sip of his drink, said nothing. But across the room, Dante muttered to Rocco, "He's done." Grace didn't hear it. She was already back behind the bar, wiping down surfaces that didn't need cleaning, telling herself it was nothing. Just another entitled customer. She'd handled worse. Then she glanced toward the VIP section. Roy hadn't moved, hadn't looked at her. But something in the air had shifted. Something quiet. Something waiting. Grace told herself she was imagining it. Told herself Roy Vollaro didn't notice bartenders, didn't care about small violations in a world built on bigger ones. But her hands kept shaking. And somewhere deep in her chest, a voice whispered, "You just became visible." And in Roy's world, visibility was the most dangerous thing you could be. Have you ever been in a room where you knew something bad was about to happen, but you couldn't stop it? Where you became the reason for someone else's anger, even though you never asked to be? If you've ever felt responsible for violence you didn't cause, stay. Because what happens next isn't just punishment, it's a claim. And Grace is about to learn there's no difference between protection and possession. The club filled as midnight approached, music heavier, bodies pressed closer. Grace moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, shaking cocktails, fielding orders, keeping her face pleasant and forgettable. She saw Kyle before he reached the bar, drunker now, bolder. He didn't wait for her to acknowledge him, just leaned over the bar into her space, eye close enough that she could smell whiskey and expensive cologne mixing into something sour. "Come on, Grace. One drink, that's all I'm asking." She didn't stop working, didn't look at him. "I already told you, Kyle, I'm working." Yeah. Send someone else." "What, you only serve the big man? That it?" Other customers were starting to notice, starting to watch. Grace kept her voice low, firm. "Step back." Kyle smirked. "Or what? You gonna tell on me?" Then he reached across the bar, grabbed her forearm. Not violent, but possessive. The kind of touch that said, "I can." Grace's stomach dropped. She yanked her arm free, trying to keep her voice steady even as her pulse hammered. "Don't touch me." Kyle stumbled slightly, laughing like it was all a game. "Relax! Jesus, I was just—" A hand landed on his shoulder, heavy, Final. Roy's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Outside! The music didn't stop, but every conversation within 10 feet did. Kyle turned, smile dying on his face. Hey man, I didn't… Outside. Roy didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He just applied the slightest pressure to Kyle's shoulder, guiding, not shoving, and Kyle followed. Because what else could he do? Dante and Rocco fell into step behind them like shadows. Grace watched them disappear through the side exit, her heart a war drum in her chest. Around her, the club pretended nothing had happened, but she could feel it, the weight of eyes on her. Whispers starting to spread like infection. Did you see that? Over the bartender? Roy never reacts like that. Grace's hands trembled as she reached for a glass. She didn't ask for this. Didn't want this attention. Didn't want to be the reason someone got hurt. But it was already too late, because 30 people in the smoking section were about to witness what happens when you touch something Roy Vollaro has decided matters. And Grace? She was about to become the most dangerous kind of untouchable, the kind that comes with a price she never agreed to pay. The alley behind Ember Lounge smelled like rain and regret. Kyle stumbled as Roy guided him into the center of the space. Not rough, just inevitable, like gravity pulling something down that was always going to fall. Dante and Rocco positioned themselves at either end, not blocking exits, just watching, waiting. Kyle tried to laugh it off. Hands up. Defensive posture meant to disarm. Look, if I crossed a line in there, I apologize. I didn't know she's not mine. Roy's voice was flat, final. Kyle exhaled, relief flooding his face. Mistake. Roy stepped closer, close enough that Kyle could see the cold calculation in his eyes. But you thought she was, which means you knew better, and you did it anyway. Kyle's smile cracked. I didn't mean anything by it, I was just… You touched her. The words landed like a verdict. Kyle's voice rose, panic threading through the bravado. Dude, it was nothing, I barely… Roy didn't let him finish. One punch, clean, surgical. Kyle's nose broke with a sound like a branch snapping underfoot. He dropped to his knees, choking on shock and copper, blood pouring through his fingers. Roy crouched down, eye level. His voice was calm now, almost kind. You're going to leave. You're going to tell everyone you tripped, and you're never coming back. Because if I see you again… He paused, letting the silence sharpen the threat. I won't stop at your nose. He stood, nodded to Dante. Dante hauled Kyle to his feet and half-dragged him toward the street like discarded trash. 30 people in the smoking section had watched the whole thing. None of them moved. None of them spoke. One man whispered to his friend, "Holy hell. Over a bartender?" The friend shook his head slowly, eyes still fixed on Roy's retreating figure. I don't think it was about her. But he was wrong. It was entirely about her. Roy just didn't know it yet. Inside, Grace stood frozen behind the bar, a cocktail shaker still gripped in white-knuckled hands. Someone had told her what happened. Told her Roy broke Kyle's nose in the alley. Told her the whole club was talking about it. About her. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to be angry, wanted to march into that VIP section and tell Roy she didn't ask for this, didn't need saving, didn't want to be the reason violence happened. But her hands were shaking too hard. Around her, everything had shifted. Customers looked at her differently now, some with pity, some with curiosity, some with fear, like she'd become dangerous just by proximity. Grace finished her shift, moving through fog. Every drink she poured felt heavier. Every smile she forced felt like a betrayal of something she couldn't name. And across the room, Roy sat in his usual spot, drink in hand, posture relaxed, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just rewritten her entire existence in 3 seconds of violence. At 2 a.m, the club emptied. Grace wiped down the bar with mechanical precision, trying to ignore the fact that Roy was still there, still sitting alone in the VIP section like a king who'd forgotten to leave his throne. She felt him before she saw him approach. You okay? His voice was quieter than she expected, almost gentle. Grace didn't look up, kept wiping the same spot over and over. Why did you do that? He crossed a line. Your line, not mine. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. She finally looked at him. His eyes were unreadable, dark and deep and carrying weight she didn't understand. You think those are different? Roy asked. Grace's breath caught. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him yes, they were different, that her boundaries belonged to her and no one else. But the words wouldn't come. You didn't have to break his face, she said instead. Yes, I did. Roy stepped closer, not threatening, just present, solid, real. Because now everyone in this city knows you're not to be touched, not by him, not by anyone. Grace's chest tightened. And if I don't want that protection, you already have it. The finality in his voice made her skin prickle. He turned toward the exit, paused at the door without looking back. Lock up when you're done. Then he was gone. Grace stood there for 20 minutes, just breathing, just existing in the strange new shape of her life. She'd been saved, or sentenced. She still didn't know which. But one thing was clear. Roy Vollaro had drawn a line around her in blood. And once you're inside a line like that, there's no stepping out without permission. No stepping out without cost. Grace locked the door with trembling hands, wondering what price she'd just agreed to pay, without ever saying yes. Grace's life changed overnight. Not because she changed, because everyone else did. The other bartenders watched her differently now. Customers gave her space she didn't ask for. Even Marcus, who'd worked at Ember for years, suddenly treated her like she was made of glass and grenades. A regular approached the bar, started to lean over the way customers always did, then stopped, stepped back, ordered from someone else instead. Grace realized with cold clarity, they weren't protecting her. They were protecting themselves from Roy. She'd become untouchable, not because she was respected, because she was his, even though he never said she was, even though she never agreed to be. But that night, a man got aggressive with another bartender. Nothing major, just rude, dismissive. Security was there in seconds, removed him immediately. The bartender looked at Grace with something between resentment and confusion. They never moved that fast for me. Grace didn't know what to say. Later, when the club thinned out, she walked to the VIP section, set down Roy's drink without being asked. We need to talk. Roy looked up, surprised, intrigued. Sit. She didn't. I didn't ask you to do what you did. I didn't ask to become this, untouchable, marked, yours. Roy leaned back, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to be interesting. You're not mine. Then why does everyone think I am? His expression didn't shift. Because they need a story that makes sense. And in their world, violence only happens over possession. And in your world? Roy paused. The silence stretched long enough to feel deliberate. In my world, violence happens over principle. Grace stared at him, searching for anger, possessiveness, control. All she saw was certainty, unshakable and absolute. I'm not your property, she said. I know. Then let me go. You were never held. But when Grace walked away, she felt the weight of his gaze following her like a hand pressed between her shoulder blades. And she knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. You ever notice how people need you to fit into a box? Protected, claimed, saved. Like you can't just be someone who had a bad night. You have to be someone's story. If you've ever been turned into a symbol when all you wanted was to be left alone, I see you. Subscribe. Because the next part? Grace stops being quiet. Grace decided to test the boundary. If she really wasn't his, then she should be able to do whatever she wanted, right? A new regular started coming to Ember. His name was Marcus, not the bartender, a different Marcus. Mid-30s, polite, normal. He talked to Grace like a person, not a possession, not a story. She liked it. One night, Marcus asked for her number. Grace hesitated, glanced toward the VIP section. Roy wasn't there. She gave Marcus her number. Within an hour, someone told Roy, not officially, just mentioned in passing, casual, insignificant. Roy didn't respond, just nodded. Grace agreed to meet Marcus for coffee. The off shift, neutral ground, a test of her own freedom. She arrived early, ordered tea, waited. Marcus didn't show. She texted him. No response. 30 minutes later, she left, confusion hardening into something sharper. The next night, she confronted Roy. "What did you do?" Roy looked genuinely confused. "About?" "Marcus, the guy who asked me out, he ghosted me." Roy took a slow sip of his drink. "I didn't touch him." "But you said something." "I didn't have to." Grace's blood turned cold. "What does that mean?" Roy set down his glass with careful precision. "It means people make assumptions, and sometimes those assumptions are correct." "You told him to stay away from me." "I didn't say a word." "Then how—" "Grace." He said her name like a period at the end of a sentence. "You're not a prisoner. Oh, but you're also not invisible anymore. And people in my world, they don't take risks on things that might belong to someone else. I don't belong to you." Roy didn't argue, just held her gaze with maddening calm. "Then prove it." Grace's hands curled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to walk out and never come back, but she knew the truth now. Walking away wouldn't change anything, because Roy hadn't built a cage around her. He'd built a reputation, and reputations followed you everywhere, even when the man who made them stayed perfectly still. Grace decided to quit. If she wasn't working at Ember, she wasn't in Roy's world. Simple. She typed up a 2-week notice, hands steady, mind made up. She handed it to the manager during her break. He read it. His face went pale. "You should talk to Roy first." "Why? He's not my boss." "Grace, he doesn't own this place or me." The manager sighed, looking older suddenly. Tired. "Just talk to him." Grace found Roy in his office, a space she'd never been invited into. Dark wood, leather, the smell of expensive whiskey and old money. She didn't knock, just walked in. "I quit." Roy looked up from his desk, expression unchanged. "Why?" "Because I can't do this. I can't be whatever this is." He leaned back in his chair, studied her. "You think leaving solves it?" "I think it's a start." "And where will you go?" "That's not your concern." "It is if you're running from something that follows you." Grace's throat tightened. Her voice came out harder than she intended. "You're not the problem. The problem is that I was vulnerable, and now I'm not. And I hate that it took you to change that." Roy stood, walked around the desk, stopped a few feet from her, close enough to feel dangerous, far enough to give her space. Then walk away. He stepped aside. The door was open, clear path, no obstacles. Grace stared at him. Her feet didn't move, because leaving didn't erase what happened, didn't make her anonymous again. She'd been seen, and in Roy's world, being seen was permanent, indelible. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. "I hate you," she whispered. Roy's expression didn't change, didn't soften, didn't harden. "I know." Grace turned and walked out, but she didn't take the resignation letter with her. And Roy noticed. He always noticed. Later that night, the envelope appeared back on her locker. Unopened, unprocessed, no note, no explanation. Just a quiet refusal. Grace crumpled it in her fist and went back to work. Because some cages don't have bars. Some cages are built from reputation and silence and the suffocating weight of being protected whether you want it or not. Grace stopped fighting it. Not because she agreed, but because she was tired of losing battles she never chose to fight. She stayed at Ember, but the rules shifted in ways she didn't understand yet. Roy started talking to her. Not orders, not corrections, conversations. "Why do you work here?" Grace blinked, caught off guard. "I need the money." "For what? Does it matter?" "It does to me." She hesitated, then answered honestly, because what did she have to lose anymore? "I'm putting myself through school, graphic design." Roy nodded, thoughtful. Show me your work sometime. Grace didn't know what to do with that. One night, her car wouldn't start. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't asked for help, but when she walked outside, there was a car waiting, Roy's driver. Mr. Vollaro asked me to make sure you got home safely. She wanted to refuse, but it was late, cold, and she was exhausted from pretending she didn't need anything from anyone. She got in. The next night, Roy left an envelope at the bar. Inside, enough to cover her tuition for the semester. No note, no explanation. Grace stared at it for a long time. Then she walked to the VIP section, set the envelope down in front of him. I'm not for sale. Roy didn't touch the envelope, didn't look surprised. I'm not buying. I'm investing. In what? In making sure you don't have to choose between safety and your future. Grace's chest tightened. Why do you care? Roy finally looked at her. Really looked. Because you're the first person in this place who didn't want anything from me, and now I can't stop thinking about what you want. Grace's breath caught. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't control or calculation. It was hunger. And it terrified her how much she recognized it, because she felt it too. Something happened to Roy. Grace heard about it from another bartender, whispered across the bar like contraband, rival family, retaliation. Details didn't matter. What mattered? Roy got hurt, not life-threatening, but enough. Grace's stomach dropped. She told herself she didn't care. Told herself it wasn't her problem. Told herself Roy Vollaro could handle his own wars. But her hands were shaking as she untied her apron. She left mid-shift. Didn't ask permission, didn't explain. She'd never been to his home, but she knew where it was. Everyone did. The gate was open when she arrived. Guards watched her approach but didn't stop her. She walked inside without knocking. Roy was on the couch, bandaged ribs, bruised jaw, blood cleaned but evidence still written across his skin. He looked up. Surprise flickered across his face before he controlled it. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, Grace shot back. She sat beside him, not touching, just close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. The silence stretched, heavy, loaded. I don't know what this is, Grace said quietly, between us. But I need you to stop pretending it's nothing. Roy's jaw tightened. Pain or something else? She couldn't tell. It's not nothing. Then what is it? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was raw, unguarded in a way she'd never heard. It's the only thing I can't control. Grace's breath caught. I'm not asking you to control it. I'm asking you to name it. Roy looked at her. Really looked, like he was memorizing her face in case this moment disappeared. If I name it, it becomes real, and if it's real, it becomes a weakness. And if you don't name it, Grace said, voice steady despite her racing heart, it becomes a lie. Roy reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither do I. Then we figure it out together. For the first time since she'd met him, Grace smiled, real, unforced. Okay. There's a moment in every complicated relationship where you stop asking if you should stay and start asking why you're still choosing to. If you've ever found yourself tangled up with someone you swore you'd never trust, but somehow they became the only one who understood, you know exactly where this is going. Hit subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets. Because the final part, it's where protection turns into something neither of them can deny. Grace returned to Ember, but this time, she wasn't invisible, and she wasn't running. A new customer tried what Kyle did, reached across the bar, touched her wrist. Before she could react, Roy was there. But this time, Grace stopped him. I've got this. She looked the man dead in the eye, voice cold, final. Touch me again, and you'll answer to me, not him. The man backed off, disappeared into the crowd. Roy watched. Something like pride flickered in his eyes. Later that night, they sat in the VIP section, alone. You didn't need me, Roy said. No, Grace agreed, but I wanted you there anyway. Roy looked at her. So what are we? Grace thought about it, about everything that led them here. The violence, the protection, the impossible, dangerous pull between them. We're the line no one else gets to cross. Roy smiled, small, real. I can live with that. Grace walked through Ember now with her head high, not because she belonged to Roy, but because she belonged to herself and chose him anyway. In the end, protection wasn't about control. It was about choice. And the velvet rope? It was never meant to keep her in. It was meant to keep everyone else out. Some men draw lines in sand, others draw them in blood. Roy drew his in both. And Grace? She learned to live inside those lines, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because love in a world like Roy's wasn't soft or safe or simple. It was dangerous, obsessive, absolute, but it was hers. And for the first time in her life, Grace understood what it meant to be truly seen, not as invisible, not as untouchable, but as chosen. And in Roy Vollaro's world, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Was this love, obsession, or something that doesn't have a name yet? Drop your theory below, and if you've ever chosen someone dangerous because they were the only one who saw you, welcome home. You're not alone. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets for more dark romance stories where love is never simple and always worth the risk.